Now let's set the scene for today's discussion. Of the top tech markets in all of North America, 4 Canadian cities appear in the top 20, with Toronto coming in 4th place. Canada's tech industry is a major economic driver and continues to expand immensely, surpassing many sectors along its way. So as the world continues this great digital acceleration, all companies essentially become tech companies, leveraging important new skills and platforms to innovate and grow. Tech-savvy companies, both large and small, have become essential to driving Canada's economy, innovating a new world, with numerous homegrown companies claiming their rightful place on the world stage, thanks to Canada's unique ecosystem of highly qualified talent and business-friendly conditions. Now, is Canada ready to capitalize on this unique moment to ensure prosperity for businesses and talent? Well, today we're joined by some exceptional leaders working at some of the most successful companies in Canada, who we get to hear from as we unpack what the next digital chapter looks like. Starting with our panelists introducing themselves before we dive into the discussion, I'd love to welcome Tom to introduce himself. Hi, Tom.
Hey, and thank you so much for hosting the event, and I look forward to the discussion today. I'm CEO at Hootsuite. We're a 1,000-person company headquartered in Vancouver. About 600 of our 1,000 employees are based in Canada. Very much a global SaaS software company focused on social media management platforms, working with all the different social media platforms around the world and helping businesses, brands, organizations manage their brand, manage their communication, and manage the experiences that they want to have as they engage on the platforms. Look forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom, and thanks for taking the time to join us. Next, I'd like to welcome Alana. Hi, Alana. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Hey, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Alana Chan. I'm the head of B2B marketing at Google Canada. And that really means that my job is to help businesses of all sizes, from SMBs up to the Fortune 100, succeed online. So my team helps provide the skills, tools, insights to help drive digital transformation across our ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. Next is Leanne. Hi, Leanne from Facebook and Instagram. Welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you for hosting, and I'm happy to be here. So I am the head of industry at Facebook and Instagram Canada, and I oversee partnerships across our consumer packaged good business, our automotive, and travel. So I work closely with my team and all of our customers. I've spent most of my career in digital publishing. Prior to Facebook, I spent time at Twitter, Verizon, which is formerly AOL, Yahoo, and Rogers, and I've had roles across sales, operations, product, and leadership. So again, happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks, Leanne. We can't wait to hear your point of view on all of this that we have to talk about today. And next is Stephen. Hi, Stephen. I'm confident he's there. I just saw him a moment ago.
I am here. Hey, Ian, how you doing?
Good.
Thank you very, very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Stephen Meggett. I am the Executive Strategy Director at EY Design Studio. And primarily my role is to really bring to life some of the digital transformations that we're seeing. So really taking the lens of the customer or the employee, finding new ways of helping them work or helping them interact with brands, using technology, design thinking methods, and a human-centered design approach to really deliver exceptionally clever digital experiences to help businesses thrive.
Awesome. We can't wait to hear your experience across many different sectors and how you go after it. Thank you so much, Stephen. And last but certainly not least, we've got John joining us. Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Good. Hello, everyone. So I'm VP of Revenue Operations at Rogers Sports and Media. We oversee 4 areas: pricing, reporting, ad ops, and tech ops across all the media channels. There's 20 linear TV channels, 54 over-the-air radio stations, and we have about 20 million Canadians across, I think it's 10 digital platforms that I think we're going to dig into a little bit today. So thanks for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. Okay, we're going to start with a question for each of our panelists tonight, and then we'll get into some group questions where everyone will chime in with their point of view. I'm going to start with the first question for Alana. Alana, most Canadian businesses are small businesses. In fact, more than 97% of the economy is made up of small to medium-sized businesses, making them really the backbone of the economy. Today, with the need to become more digitally savvy and reliant on tools like search and social to stand out, how is Google working with small to medium-sized businesses to support them in being competitive and to survive in the long term?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's really true. SMBs are the backbone of our economy. Canada's more than just the major metros, right? There's businesses all across the country. And in Canada, our SMB employment rate is actually 40% higher than the US. So it's even more important for us that our SMBs are competitive on a global scale. And I think that's where COVID has really one of those life lemonade situations. Forever, Canadians have always had this Canada first mentality. But it's really hard to get scales when we only have a population of 36 million. So COVID has forced some mindset shifts and removed the concept of borders and opened up the opportunity for export. And the demand is there, right? So right now, fewer than 10% of our SMBs export, yet we know that those that do grow 2 times faster than others. And the demand is there. 40% of all clicks to Canadian advertisers come from international locations. And we're one of the only G7 countries with trade agreements with all the other G7 countries. So we have all the conditions to, export more Canadian goods. And my tip for this audience, if anyone wants to get started, would be to check out a tool that we launched called Market Finder. It's a free one-stop shop for everything export. You plug in your website and it helps you find your best markets for your product and services. And, we have great success stories with like Deciem or, The Ordinary, started 7 years ago and now has 90% of sales outside of Canada. Inkbox now sells to 150 countries. And even a small pen shop in Yorkville, Lay Wines, run by a 70-year-old man who's had this shop for 30 years. He went online after the pandemic and now 30% of his sales come from the US. Wow. So really it's about getting more Canadian goods out there is really how we're gonna keep our economy growing and flourishing.
Wonderful. And Google plays a really important role in helping that happen because as a tech giant, which is a term commonly used, it's important to support those that are just joining the digital economy now because of the pandemic and the environment that we've all been having to deal with right now. And all these small to medium-sized businesses have to evolve with. How is Google sort of supporting those small to medium-sized businesses in becoming digitally savvy? Because there is no longer a technology company, as we were talking about in our discussion earlier. What are your thoughts on that and how they enter this realm of becoming digital companies?
Yeah, I think, every company now is a digital company. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's the only way to succeed. And digital skills are going to be the rising tide that raises all ships. And so this year, we actually launched a program called Shop Here, which aims to address this flywheel of digital skills, employment, and SMBs being successful, right? So we partnered with Digital Main Street, which is a nonprofit. We hired 1,000 students who didn't have summer jobs anymore because of the pandemic, trained them on digital skills, and paid them to get 50,000 students online, 50,000 businesses online. And we're about 20% way through our goal. But this, doesn't happen in a silo. It requires a lot of partnership from other big corporations, the government, municipalities, nonprofits. But I'm really happy that we were able to hold hands to drive this kind of change. I think since the pandemic, 135,000 small businesses have come online in Canada.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations on the progress you're making. And as you said, it requires an ecosystem and environment for this kind of change and growth to happen. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer. We can't wait to hear more about your thoughts on the questions coming up. Next is Leanne. Leanne, once the globally dominant and untouchable social media platform, Facebook, the competition is growing now, and the ability to remain the platform of choice is essential to the future of the business. How is Facebook and Instagram doing in Canada compared to other markets where you operate when it comes to finding new and innovative ways to engage your users and to be relevant to the next generation?
Sure. Ian, there's a couple ways I'll answer that. First, though, it's really going back to our mission, which we have stayed true to from the beginning, which is to give people the power to build community and bring the world closer together across our family of apps. And when we think of the future of connection, we are building the next computing platform that is centered around people. And we call it Facebook Reality Labs. So our work across augmented and virtual reality and consumer hardware is to enable much deeper connection through social presence. The feeling that you're there with another person and sharing the same space, regardless of your physical distance. So instead of having devices that take us away from people around us, so the example would be my family and I, the five of us could be sitting in a living room, but if we're all on devices, we're not together. The next platform will help us be more present with each other and help the technology get out of the way. So this will really come in the form of a breakthrough with AR glasses. So if we deliver on what we intend to, this should become much more of a reality across the next decade. For context, currently there's more than 600 million people that are using augmented reality just across our apps and devices every month. So that's one. The other piece, and Alana's already touched on, is e-commerce and just facilitating new ways of shopping. So people are already buying and selling on Facebook and Instagram. So it's natural for our platforms to help businesses quickly move to e-commerce. And again, COVID has just accelerated this. A few months ago, we announced a new way for a business, any business, to set up a virtual storefront for free. And we're calling it Facebook Shop. So the idea is that any seller, whether it's a major global brand or a small local shop, can create a customizable virtual store where you can browse products that will be curated based on your personal taste. So that's something we're very, very excited about. And again, so much of our planning and our priorities have just been accelerated in this unique year. But finally, more broadly speaking, what we're doing when we think of innovation and continuing to gauge our users going forward, it's about anticipating consumer needs before the consumer knows what they're looking for sometimes, and then quickly prioritizing. So e-commerce and the importance of immediacy. If we all put ourselves in the consumer's shoes, we know our expectations are higher than they've ever been, and that is not going to change. And then there's personalization. We know how important it is on our platform for everyone to have their own personal experience. Just think of what Netflix and Spotify have done in this space. And then finally, prioritization around safety and security across our platform. So that's where we're spending our time when we think about innovation going forward.
And thanks, Deanne. That's wonderful to hear and really interesting, in fact. In terms of Canada and Facebook and Instagram and all the other platforms, how is Facebook in Canada performing compared to other markets when it comes to being innovative and engaging with new users and businesses through these new platforms and opportunities? Any thoughts on that?
I think there's a couple ways. We do a lot of, if we think of our Facebook Reality Labs, we have some of those initiatives coming out of our Montreal office. But also, I would say when we think of the opportunity that shops will have, we're a smaller market, and the advantage there is often the ability to be nimble and work very closely with our partners. So it would be the acceleration of the Facebook shop opportunity in market.
Wonderful. Yeah. We often hear the phrase Canada first, Canada best. So keep that.
Well, we do. We've said it many times, we're the opportunity, and it's true. When you're a small, nimble office, you can have alignment and collaboration. You can be very specific about and crystal clear on your priorities. And that's really helpful when you want to drive an important initiative forward and quickly.
Absolutely. And help prepare that environment to gain the insights you need for broader scale, which is great. Wonderful. Thanks, Leanne. Looking forward to your thoughts on the upcoming questions. Next, I have a question for Tom. Hootsuite is the perfect platform for businesses to optimize and maximize their ability to deliver successful social media marketing campaigns. The last year has made digital marketing skills increasingly important for all marketers. What are some of the biggest digital marketing trends you've witnessed in this time, the last 9 months?
Yeah, it's been quite a year on social media platforms. We have at Hootsuite, we have a little over 210,000 paying customers around the globe, and over clearly close to 18 million freemium customers on our platform. So we've been able to watch through the data the different behavioral activities going on social media. When we came into the year, there were a little over 4 billion people on the social media platforms, actively on social media platforms. So roughly half the world's population is active on social media platforms. And during this global pandemic, the numbers have gone up extensively. We're working on our next assessment of just what those numbers are, but it's a dramatic increase. And so the world's moved to social media, and businesses and brands and organizations have moved to social media as well. We just came out with a social trends report, just looking at the trends that are evolving this year across social media. And as you think about, who buys our product, it's primarily marketers, communications, social media departments in organizations. And those are organizations that have been dramatically impacted as events have gone away and as traditional marketing avenues have gone away during this pandemic, or at least dramatically been reduced. They've had to look for new places to communicate, and the logical place to connect with customers is on social media. So some of the trends that we saw this year that will definitely feed into next year is around return on investment. Traditionally, social media has been a publishing area for brands to get out and publish. Not a lot of focus on return on investment. Tons of focus now on, as ad dollars have gotten tight, as marketing dollars have gotten tight, of looking at return on investment. The second is around social listening. This has been a year of activism like no other, and the activism is happening on the social media platforms. And you've seen a lot of big brands and companies make tremendous missteps by not listening and trying to dominate a conversation as opposed to really listening and participating in a conversation. The third is that the digital marketers have traditionally aimed at a younger demographic. What this pandemic has shown is that boomers are very active on the social media platforms, and they have the financial wherewithal to withstand working through a pandemic. And so the brands and the organizations that have focused on boomers have done very, very well. And you're starting to see more and more active marketing and advertising toward boomers on the social media platforms. The fourth is around really starting to tie together identity, which has been a common thing in other aspects of businesses, systems, but tying together identity with social media so that you can really start building that one-to-one relationship in a different way than you've traditionally been able to do. And then the fifth is directly related to values and brands and organizations really assessing their values as we've been through a year of activism and going back and reflecting on your values and how you're going to actively reflect your values, as we're seeing a more values-focused consumer out there, really thinking about who they want to do business with and wanting to do business with entities that they're aligned with on values. So a really interesting year in this space.
Really fascinating. We could spend a lot more time just talking about that alone.
Yes.
We'll pick that up another time in one of our marketing panels. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom. Stephen, EY works with some of the biggest companies in the world, and you work closely with those teams in Canada. Given your role leading digital transformations through experience design at EY, what can you tell us about the biggest challenges and opportunities that lie ahead for the Canadian digital economy?
Great question. So I think there's a lot of different challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, and I think primarily, the biggest one is that we all have to grapple with is that COVID really has changed the game for a lot of us. The customer expectations have evolved, employee expectations have evolved. Basically, our context for everything that we used to do is now different. We may never get back to normal, and we certainly can never go back to normal digital operations either. Those customer expectations are really transcending all industries. There isn't anyone that's affected, or that isn't affected rather. We need to start leveraging technology and data in a much better way to influence the user experience that we're creating and look at what is available to us to essentially remove some of the design, but introduce more technology that reduces some friction and reduces some barriers to allowing people to have those amazing experiences. Leanne brought up Spotify and Netflix, just leveraging that technology to personalize those experiences more, to reduce some of the cognitive load is really, really an important factor to making digital experiences that really drive digital transformations more seamless, more omni-channel, more relevant to people. The next challenge and opportunity is really sort of the war for talent. We now are fighting for the same talent across industries. When you introduce this new context of doing things, every single company is now looking to have the same set of players on their team that can focus more in design thinking and human-centered design and UX, and really bring these new experiences within an organization across silos and really develop some wonderful ways of working. Our talent has the opportunity to stay in Canada, or it can go elsewhere. We're now seeing that there's companies all over the world that are looking to grab talent from anywhere, because that's the way that we work now. And so we, as Canadians, have to create the right short-term and long-term opportunities to help keep the talent here and keep introducing and innovating new technology and new products within those experiences. And lastly, on the war for talent is we need to tap into new sources of talent. I think one of the most interesting things that EY has done, I'm not a part of this, but some of my colleagues are, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. And what we're going to start seeing is really tapping into some new sources of talent, perhaps talent that was not necessarily looked at as traditional, or were perhaps discounted, because there's a neurodiverse talent pool that exists. People that are on the autism spectrum that would have perhaps been overlooked for certain roles, they're finding a home within EY now as part of our workforce, to bring just a different perspective and a different way of working that can really broaden our diversity, broaden our perspective, and drive more value for our clients. So I think we're going to start seeing that across the board as well. The next couple of things is innovation is really coming from everywhere. There's a lot of small tech startups that are now competing against larger ones. And this is primarily fueled by a strong entrepreneurial environment within Canada. There's a strong capital investment environment in Canada, and a strong innovation network. With the help of Google, Facebook, Shopify, lots of large organizations that are helping to create this strong capital investment environment and really fueling that entrepreneurial environment as well. I think that's a really, really big role for Canadian companies to play. And it's going to help stave off a little bit of that, competition is coming from everywhere, even from non-traditional competitors as well, with, the big tech firms entering into perhaps non-traditional sectors that they weren't originally playing in, like financial services. Traditional manufacturers and legacy brands are now finding ways to go direct to consumer rather than playing the B2B game. And all of that is going to require, and what we've seen on our side is requiring a significantly different business model and set of technological capabilities that a lot of these organizations didn't have before. And so it creates an environment where there's going to be a lot of partnering, a lot of ecosystem building, and a lot of opening up new ways of working between different companies. And I think the last point that I'll make is there's a good reason and a compelling reason to do this, is because we are all in the midst of a digital transformation right now. And I think we should probably all stop calling it digital transformation and just call it transformation and business transformation. The innovation cycles that currently befall us have gotten so compressed because of COVID. Everyone is less reluctant or reticent to spend money to try and find something that works, that we're going headlong into making these investments into technology and bringing these experiences to life that used to take, years or months, and now it's being compressed into potentially weeks. So that's going to require a significant level of agility and maybe a reset of ROI expectations. But for the most part, this compressed innovation cycle is really what's driving a lot of organizations to start really tackling the big chunky challenges that it currently exist.
Wow, really insightful. some really interesting territories to unpack there, especially the war on talent, like you just mentioned, and talent from new places. That's a really interesting opportunity that we can talk more about in a moment. And finally, John, in the highly competitive ad tech and media industry, how has Rogers prioritized new digital skills in its innovation roadmap? And what might the biggest obstacles be on that journey for you?
I think you just have to say you got to prioritize digital first, right? Before you even get into the roadmap. If I got to go back a couple of chapters, probably 20 years ago when I got into the media space. I showed up at Global Television at the time, an Eastern Canadian broadcaster. The internet had only just begun. I think it was a $74 million market. And I remember the executive at that time saying, "Oh, this internet thing's just a big fad." And they put about 3 or 4 of us into the shipping area. They built a bunker, and away we went. And I mean, look at now, it's an $8 billion market. So a little more than a fad. And I look at Rogers Sports and Media right now. I mean, an internet native is now running our company in Jordan Banks. And I think we've been pretty open. We have to convert from, being that traditional media company to a digital company, or else, right? Mm-hmm. And Stephen, you're bang on. I mean, it's just transformation. Of course, it's digital first. So when you look at our roadmap, I mean, it's digital end to end, right? Getting our data house in order. I talked about 10 digital platforms that we've got to build across. Behind that is probably 15 different monetization systems. So when we're looking at our roadmap and prioritizing digital, it's just digital. It's how do we take that traditional media company that's linear and over the air, bring it to digital platforms, and right now we're just spending a lot of time and getting our data house in order. Tom, you mentioned identity. I mean, it's all we think about right now, and automation. So I think it just, again, starts with it is what it is. It's digital.
Yeah. And interesting in terms of just going back to a comment Stephen made there earlier in terms of this dynamic between the demand for talent in Canada from outside of Canada is an interesting thought that coming into this, I wasn't thinking about as much as I perhaps should have, and others might have thought about. And we'll talk about that more in a moment. Okay, let's move into some group questions here.
Oh, I might just chime in and say that Waterloo is the #1 source of Google engineers globally. So there is a lot of demand for Canadian talent.
That's fascinating. Wow. Okay, noted. Waterloo. If you're tuning in from Waterloo, that's good news for you. Let's move into some group questions. Okay, so let's start with this one. What are you the most excited about when thinking of the potential for Canada on the world's technology stage? Perhaps Tom, followed by Leanne and John, and then others, please weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me. I'm standing in my living room in San Francisco. I joined Hootsuite as CEO in July. So I went through the interview process, joined the company, onboarded and running the company without being able to cross the border. The pandemic has not allowed that to happen. So I'm learning about business in Canada through a video screen. But what I see is fantastic. Our headquarters, Ryan Holmes, the founder of Hootsuite, founded the company in Vancouver. Vancouver hosts 600 of our 1,000 employees. It's where the bulk of our engineering and product talent is. Incredibly competitive space is what I'm learning as we lay out our growth plan and look at what we want to invest in to build out this platform to support our global customers. We're competing with every big tech company that I competed with here in San Francisco. They're all there, and they're all growing, and they're all increasing their footprint in Vancouver and in Canada in general. So incredibly competitive. I think with the US's kind of disastrous immigration policies, I would say, over the last really more than a decade. It's created tremendous uncertainty for the globe and for tech talent specifically coming into the U.S. And the last 4 years has been extreme as to what that means. And families want a little more certainty. And so I think it's creating a tremendous opportunity for Canada. And what I'm seeing out of the government of Canada and how they're supporting the businesses through this pandemic, and how supportive they're being to helping employers employ and to keep their workforce whole to navigate through this is really quite impressive. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity in Canada to and specifically in Vancouver to take a big bite out of what has really been a stronghold here on the West Coast of the United States. And it's happening in real time. And I think there's an opportunity to accelerate that.
Interesting. What are your thoughts there, Leanne?
Yeah, I sort of come at it a little bit differently. And what I'm really excited about is leveraging our platform and the resources we have at Facebook for good, and having an impact at a local level that can be shared out globally as a best practice. At Facebook, we have a lot of social giving tools. We raise, lots of funds across our platform. People have the opportunity to give back to organizations and charities that matter most to them. But at a local level, again, being a smaller market that can be nimble, we can really get behind what's important to Canadians and consumers on our platform. I think it was Tom who mentioned, purpose and values is more important than ever for consumers and for organizations. So just some of the initiatives that we have done in our market in Canada that we've been able to share globally with our counterparts to leverage. Just this week, we announced a partnership with the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Businesses. This included a $500,000 investment from Facebook Canada. The investment includes access to our digital skills training certificate program, and the training is offered to help Indigenous business owners learn how to build their brand online. It covers membership fees for them to ensure they can participate in this program, and it can be supported, throughout 2021. Another initiative this year, Canada United. This was a nationwide campaign to mobilize Canadians to support small and local Canadian businesses. So driven and in partnership with RBC, we helped turn an idea into a movement and action for small businesses across the country. Already this has, garnered several small business grants, and we saw a real spike in local spending in Canada throughout the campaign. And finally, we have a partnership with Kids Help Phone. So supporting mental health initiatives is important to Facebook, but in this market, not only are we talking about supporting funds, but from a product perspective, you can now use Facebook Messenger to access Kids Help Phone line 24/7 for any kind of mental health support. And again, in COVID, Kids Help Phone saw a dramatic spike, more than 100% increase in calls and texts. So we're proud to get behind these initiatives. And again, it's very important to consumers and to us at Facebook that we are doing what we can to have local impact and then share it back globally with our counterparts.
Wonderful. Thanks, Leanne. John, anything?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but I'm super proud of Canada. And I kind of feel like we're on the lead wave now, and again, from within ad tech space, we have partners in the U.S., UK, and France, Germany, South Africa, Australia. If I go around the world, and we're not having calls with them now and wondering what they're up to and following. We're actually on the same page. We're very aligned in our thinking, and so it's just we're not playing catch up anymore.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. And we're getting calls from, for example, US networks that want us to demo some of the things we've built. So that's it. I'm super proud of this place. I mean, Hootsuite out of Shopify was supposed to join us today. I think of a company like Index Exchange in the ad tech market. I mean, these are just great Canadian companies doing great stuff on a global stage. And I honestly don't think about it that much anymore. I'm not afraid of the big guys.
Yeah, well, that is the right way to put it in terms of the mentality in the marketplace and the ability to actually deliver world-class solutions, products, and goods and talent. I'd like to go to a question for Alanis and Steve and others. Please chime in. What does the next decade look like for the Canadian tech and digital talent workforce? And what needs to be true in order for Canada to meet this moment, especially from industry, the government, education, and individuals?
I'm happy to chime in here. I think Justin Trudeau said something that I really liked, where we are moving from a resource-based economy to a resourcefulness-based economy. And I think that really captures kind of how our country is evolving. I think, like John said, we're all really proud of how Canadian tech particularly, is coming onto the world stage. And I think the next 10 years are going to be the best 10 years that we've seen for our sector. I think there's two things that are really needed to make sure we can continue to lead here. One is bringing the old along with the new, right? I don't think we can leave people behind here. I think that digital divide is going to be really real and problematic if we cannot have basic digital skills for a wider population. So we've invested a lot in our Grow with Google programs. For example, this year we trained 80,000 Canadians to get digital certifications. We're putting a lot of effort into free access to tools like that. The second thing is really about diversity and inclusion. I think we're all really proud of our multicultural society that we live in here. But I think, at Google, we think about how important it is to be representative of our users. And you can't be representative of your users if your teams and values aren't also reflecting those views. So I think as we grow, as we're getting more Canadian talent, and we're reskilling, I think we have to really be thoughtful of great representation across the board.
And Stephen, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I agree with Alana. There's a lot of what she just said that rings true entirely for me. I look at the next decade as really sort of a realization of what we do on a micro scale with larger organizations, where we try to identify where silos exist and help them find new ways of working and breaking those silos down to create more collaboration and more sharing, ultimately to bring to life a much better experience for employees and customers. I think we're going to start actually trying to see that happen on a macro scale, where we're looking at academia and government and our social institutional structures starting to bring some of those silos down and start sharing and working together over the next decade and well into the decade after that, because there is going to continue to be a war for that tech talent, and we need to find a way to compete for all of that talent with other countries as well. And in order for us to really succeed, we are going to need to work with academia to ensure that we're building the knowledge and skills early on in the lives of people. Like it's not going to start when they get a job. It needs to start very, very early on in life to expose them to STEM and to expose them to careers that they may not have thought were for them. We need to work with government more to create incentives and programs that will train and nurture tech talent, give them a reason beyond just the job to stay here and continue to work and develop the fabric of Canadians. And those incentives, whether through tax credits or organizations, we still need to continually invest in technology and leverage that local talent. So that's sort of where my view is that we're just going to start seeing some of the collaborative structures that we put in place, and in a micro way start to expand on a more macro level.
Incredible. And all of that from what both of you just said is so important. But one thing I do want to say to those tuned in is the individual is where it starts. The individual has to recognize the moment that we're in now. And I would say 2020 has been the year that's really brought it into central focus. The individual needs to recognize the need to perhaps put in a few extra hours before work, after work, start to build essential skills. And for those that aren't able to afford the training, to find the grants, to find the support, because the ecosystem is being built and it's in a pretty solid place, and there's room to grow all over. But it really boils down to the individual recognizing the potential ahead of them if they put their mind and their time towards the upskilling that's required.
And one thing along those lines, one of the things that we've had a tremendous amount of success around is building an academy and certification process around really building core skills of how to represent. And it's primarily focused on small businesses, but it's applicable across any organization that wants to represent their brand on social media. But it's really taking them through the basics, and it's just a core set of building blocks and certifications. It's available for anyone to go through. And we've seen universities starting to pick it up and bring it into core curriculums, and even down at high school and kind of pre-university levels as well. So there's not only is it incumbent on people to get out and get themselves skilled, there's a lot of resources now that are available as well if you're willing to put the effort into it.
And government's going a long way to step in too.
Yep.
We see it in Ontario, we see it out there on the West Coast too, which is great. Fantastic. Anyone else want to weigh into that before I move on? Okay. Stephen, that was so close. I was hoping we were going to have one of those very cute moments that could go all over the internet, but we missed that one.
I think that was the future digital leader behind you.
Right there. He was telling me how he uses user experience design to help his kids map out their days. So these kids are way ahead. Let's talk about the new working environments from what we've all experienced this year. And as we move into this new world of this hybrid of working from home and eventually, hopefully in the office in the post-pandemic world, what impact will this have on Canadians and their ability to work on products in other markets? We've touched on it at the very beginning. And do we think headquarters in the US will invest even more into Canada? I know we had touched on this, but let's expand upon it a little more. Stephen, do you want to start first?
Sure. Yeah, I think the virtual model that we're sort of all experiencing right now, even literally right now, has pushed things to a level that we I think never thought we would see. I think everyone thought they might have a choice of going into the office 1 or 2 days a week and then maybe working from home 1 day a week just to kind of take a break. But we're all sort of here. We're all in this Hollywood squares kind of life right now, where we're seeing people in tiny squares and tiny pixels. But it's proving to work fairly well. I mean, we're learning about better ways of working, and we're learning about psychological safety and making sure that people have what they need to actually, be successful in this environment. And so let's put that aside and just assume for a moment that the working world is adapting well to this model. And I think for Canada, it opens up 3 really high potential opportunities for Canada as really a near shore tech hub for the US and larger organizations in the US. There's obviously the exchange rate is very, very attractive. And that can help establish more opportunities for Canadians to work with interesting technologies as larger organizations from the States look to Canada as an option. Opportunities for Canadians to work really, for non-Canadian global tech firms is also there. So we don't necessarily need to relocate to where these other firms are located, and we get to sort of inject our Canadian culture into the global stage by having access to these organizations. Canadian firms really can access talent without really needing to import it locally, meaning we have the vast network of Canadian talent available to us. And we're a really, really big country, and people had to move to larger cities like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver to get access to the jobs that paid well, were sexy, and there weren't a lot of organizations that were paying top dollar when they were in a lower population town. And so that has created a vast change in where people can live, where people can work, and how work fits into their lifestyle. That's now part of the discussion. It's no longer a given that if you want to work in whatever technology industry, that you have to move to a big hub. You can now, live anywhere as long as you've got an internet connection, and really contribute to some incredible experiences and build some incredible products right from the comfort of your own, shed. And so that's a really big impact on how we're going to work. And there's going to be some new apps, and Leanne spoke about them, earlier, about how technology can sort of get out of the way and people can feel connected more in this new world, because that is certainly going to become a factor. The fatigue of sitting in front of a screen is real, and finding ways to rejuvenate and reconnect with each other and with nature, I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, I want to move on to some specifics here in terms of the skills that are going to be in demand, and I'd love Alana and Leanne and John and Tom to please answer this question. What specifically are you seeing as skills that are becoming more valuable today and over the next decade? Alana, do you want to?
Sure, I can jump in. I really think about this in two ways. So at Google, we hire on 4 attributes and have hired over these 4 attributes for the last 20 years. So I think they have some longevity to them. That's general cognitive ability. So how well can you problem solve? In short, how smart are you? Role-related knowledge, leadership, and Googliness. And so we have pretty specific definitions that go under that. But it kind of talks about, how well-rounded of a person are you? How can you work through ambiguous problems and think creatively outside of the box? I think there's actually like a frontier of chaos, which they've actually studied at Google. So it's, if there's too much chaos, nothing gets done. And if there's not enough chaos, it's like stifling, right? And so the innovation curve is somewhere in between those two. So you need people who can thrive in that kind of environment to get stuff done. So I think those types of attributes will always be valuable. I don't think we're going into a world with less chaos. And then the second way to think about it, if I were going to do it all over again, what kind of skills would I want to have right now? I would want to be a great acquisition marketer, right? So that is a very specific and high demand job right now. I would also learn to code and figure out how to use TensorFlow, build some ML or AI models. I think there's a lot happening in that space.
Fantastic. Leanne, what are your thoughts there?
I sort of took a broader perspective on this. So, and it's around e-commerce when we think of valuable skills. So Canadians are very highly digitally penetrated, yet only 40% of Canadian businesses have an e-commerce website. Now, this stat might have been pulled a little recently, so I'm sure every day, we're moving the needle there. But the point is, there's a lot of room for growth. Consumers expect all brands to be omni-channel and to have a frictionless commerce experience wherever they go. So we see an urgent imperative for brands to accelerate the pace of e-commerce adoption in Canada and frankly around the world. And with that, skills are required. Consumer expectation is enormous, and this year in the pandemic has only accelerated that. We talk a lot that we've seen 10 years of digital transformation take place in the span of a number of months this year. So those skills are important. And just to really put a point on it, I've talked a lot about people's expectation for quick and easy experiences, and if they don't get it, they will leave. So, cart abandonment accounts for at least 50% of attrition from a marketer's purchase funnel, costing e-marketers somewhere between $2 and $4 trillion a year. So again, the need to have those proper skills to build that e-commerce experience is very important. So it's a big opportunity when you consider, skills development. Now, we work with a lot of consumer packaged goods, very traditional brands, and on average, in conversations this year, E-commerce might account for less than 10% of revenue, but it's where more than 50% of the growth is coming from. So, Ian, when you talked about recognizing potential, there is enormous potential here in this space for skills.
Absolutely. Tom and John.
Not a lot to add to that. I think, the demand is already outstripping supply across product, across design, across engineering in Canada. I think as 5G comes into play, as more processing power comes into play, as the public cloud continues to evolve, and really everything becomes digitized and digital products, the demand for being able to bring that cohesively together into a design aesthetic that is easy and navigatable and delightful, to Leanne's point, and is agile, is continuing to adjust to experience, only becomes more and more important. And so having those that foundational set of skills, I think, becomes more important than ever for the success of anyone working in the digital space, which we've already mentioned. I think Alana mentioned we're all in the digital space today. So I think a super critical component that shouldn't be skipped, because it is going to be the differentiator of the companies and the entities that are successful and not successful. And I think the technology evolution that we're seeing right before us, that is enabling things that we couldn't have imagined just a couple of years ago, as we think about where AR is going to go and how it's going to be able to play with these high-speed networks and these processing power and create completely different experiences for e-commerce, for the way that we interact with each other. There's multiple iterations of transformations just right in front of us. Getting everyone to the same sets of platforms and on the same sets of technologies, which we haven't done. We're gonna have half the earth on that is a big step. Yeah. But then what's going to come next are going to be even more transformational, I believe.
That's right.
Is curiosity a skill?
It's definitely an attribute.
It's important.
I'm still thinking about some things Alana said, but data and automation, data science, ML, absolutely hottest. Can't get enough of it. But I do think approach, and I do think a lot about chaos, and it can be pretty overwhelming. But I think it's an approach, and I have a technical lead that I work with, and he's always said, okay, what's the simplest thing that might actually work? And that's how I think skills, absolutely digital, but I really think it is approach, problem solving. Alana mentioned it's just understanding how to tear down a lot of complexity, and it's almost like there's more you don't know than you know sometimes, but just kind of continuing to march forward. Tom, and you mentioned agile. I mean, it feels like the way we have to live now. But yeah, not too much to add other than that.
No, that's great. That's a great build. And what we often talk about at BrainStation is learning how to learn. Because individuals that join our boot camps in data science, for example, might not have done any significant mathematics in their past or engineering for that matter, but they learn how to learn in the process, which is so important. Really great answers. Question here, I'd like, Tom, maybe you can touch on, and Stephen, you can build upon, and others, please. Professor Scott Galloway recently stated that it's the end of the brand era and the start of the product era. In the context of time, digital products are still incredibly nascent. What do you think we can look forward to in the product era?
I love Professor Galloway, by the way. Great podcast. Lots of innovative thinking there. I think it's, we're the dominant players, of which some of us are in dominant positions and have been now over a decade, are going to get disrupted, just like we've been disrupting entities. And so I think the acceleration of disruption with the acceleration of technologies is going to be the norm. And some of the big concerns that we have today, where regulations are being considered and all kinds of things are being considered, for external entities to try to put boundaries and controls around these technology platforms are going to get self-corrected by disruption. And it's hard to see where and how some of this disruption is going to take place, but it's happening right now. I mean, it's happening right now. We can't see it. It's coming, and that's exciting. It's just this continual acceleration of disruption and creating new and interesting opportunities in really every space that we do business in.
I think it's a really, really great question. I think your question reminds me of there's a designer, Michael Beirut, is a very, very well-known graphic designer, focuses really on brands and logo types and logo design. And I love his definition of what a brand is. And a brand is a vessel that people fill up with meaning. And it's not necessarily something that a company creates. A brand is something that is created by the people who fill that up with meaning. And I think when you're talking about brands and products, the brand, the logo, what people typically define as a brand plays second fiddle to the experience that those brands are creating. And how a consumer interacts with that brand is the meaning that is going to be associated with that brand. So ultimately, experience becomes brand. And so how you're going about creating those experiences for your customers or for your employees will ultimately ascribe the value to the brand that you have. So I'll just leave it there on that one.
Pretty powerful. Anyone want to build upon that? Okay. I just want to give a 5-minute warning to the audience. Please, if you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, please send them through. We'll be getting to those in just a moment. I have just 2 more questions before we go to those. The first is for everyone, actually. What are your favorite resources that help you stay up to date on tech trends and topics and skills? Let's go. In my screen, I've got Leanne, Alana, Stephen, Tom, and then John. Leanne.
Sure, I can start. I mean, I think it's we've talked about this. I think John said the word curiosity. It's being a curious learner and leading in and staying up to date on what's going on in technology. I love, the Financial Times, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. Obviously, I get a lot of my news on the Facebook family of apps. But I also spend time understanding my customer's business. It's really important, not just an earnings report, but truly understanding their businesses. I mean, I mentioned I work with, automotive, the OEMs, travel partners, consumer packaged goods, retail. Those are vastly different businesses, and how they're responding to COVID, how they're growing their business, how they're all individually being disrupted is different. And it's really important to understand your customers and their changing business.
Good advice.
I will make a plug for Think with Google, since I run that business in Canada, but I think it obviously has some great insights. Other things I look at, if you don't subscribe to Stratechery with Ben Thompson, that is one of my absolute favorites, and he does a podcast, Exponent, that complements it. Recode, Decode, obviously Kara Swisher, who's no longer there, but also Scott Galloway, all part of that family. And then for fun, I actually am slightly addicted to Reddit, and there's this podcast called Endless Thread, and it highlights what's goes into a Reddit hole every week. And it's actually fascinating.
Wow.
I like that one too.
Yeah. Write that one down.
I for whatever reason, I've taken sort of a backseat to having an inundated inbox with news feeds and all that sort of stuff. So I happen to rely a lot on my team to give me things that I should really look at, or interesting things. I'm a deeply curious person, and so I do ask a lot of questions. So I'm also very lucky that EY is filled with some really, really smart people that publish some really amazing articles and content that I can leverage and read, and they're really, really great resources to read. I have been a Wired reader forever, and so I love reading Wired. And it's a great experience to read that. It's good content. And Scott Galloway is also pretty awesome. And And for podcasts, I really love Planet Money, which I know is not necessarily tech related, but I love how they think and how they tie economic issues to technology and to society at large. And they go very, very broad. And I like it when people just connect the dots in really, really interesting ways. So it's one of my favorite podcasts.
Wonderful. Great advice.
And I'll jump off podcasts because I'm chewing them up right now. But I think for us in the ad space, Ad Exchanger Talks is a must listen. But I'm also going for sort of, and I think it's being home and being on screens a lot. I'm looking for more narrative type stuff. So there's a podcast called Danny in the Valley, who interviews people in the tech space, really obscure folks like early stage tech individuals. And then I'm trying to go deep on data. So there's one called Data Chief, Hub and Spoken is another. But you know what? There's just so much out there in the podcast space, and I'm finding kind of walking and listening is the one thing you can do in 2020.
I love that. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Tom.
Yeah, I ditto a whole bunch of the things named. I do think it fundamentally comes down to curiosity and the recognition that the world is changing very quickly. It's full of really smart and interesting people. And so being open to that. I'm a early riser, so I get up every morning at 5:15 and I consume from 5:15 till 6:30, 6:45 before I deal with my Peloton addiction each morning. But I think it's important to be plugged in and to be learning and be challenged. I'm fortunate to have 3 teenagers as well that keep me plugged in insanely into technology, which is invaluable in the space that I'm working in, to have those perspectives and the terrifying use cases that they have of how they utilize technology. It's really interesting. And then I've always really enjoyed learning by doing. So I was a programmer early in my career. I spent 12 years inside of Ernst & Young in management consulting all over the world. And I've always learned a lot by working with companies. At Hootsuite, it's been a little bit different because it's been virtual, but I've been able to do quite a bit with customers. At Zendesk, I was deep in with customers, and the innovation of the way they leverage technologies, they being customers, a lot of startups, a lot of fast growing techs, and how they think about leveraging technology, how they think about data, how they think about solving problems for their customers, has always spurred me. It's always inspired me and challenged me around thinking. And I think keeping that curiosity and keeping really close to the innovations that are taking place down in small disruptive businesses is really, really important as well.
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest decisions people need to start making hard decisions around is whether to watch The Crown or to keep streaming or to spend a bit of time learning something new. Probably not a bad move to learn something new. But that being said, dive on in and binge when it's needed and you need to disconnect. Absolutely. Okay, question. This one I want to send to Alana here quickly, because we spoke about it and your answer really fascinated me. Do you think skills and experience are now more valued than mere credentials? And others, please build.
Yeah, I think when we talked earlier, I told you how our CMO, Lorraine, thinks about this. And she maps people on a 2x2 matrix on attitude and aptitude. And what that means is it doesn't really matter how brilliant you are. If you have the wrong attitude, you're not worth it, right? And I like to think of this as hustle. So the passion, the energy, the je ne sais quoi that you're bringing to the table, plus your talent, is a really powerful combination. And honestly, if you are leaning into your superpowers, it can help people overlook a lot of your gaps, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for that X factor where someone wants to be there and wants to learn and wants to do their best.
Absolutely. Excellent. Okay. I think that's our cue to open up to public questions. So thank you to those of you that have sent us your questions. I'm just going to get them up here in the background and we'll dive into these. We have 20 minutes or so and we'll get to as many of these as possible. Okay, first question is from Alex. This is a question that can be answered by anyone on the panel. With major digital startup and tech hubs, not only in the US, but also in Europe, cities like London, Berlin, and Stockholm, and Asia, how does Canada's next digital chapter look compared to the global stage, and can it keep up? I think we touched on this a little bit, but who would like to answer Alex's question there before I send it to someone? I think, John, you touched on this a little bit before in terms of the confidence in what Canada's doing and not having to play catch up. Perhaps just reiterate a little bit there.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, don't ask me. I thought Stephen might have a good perspective on this one, but I'll go back to that. Like, it's interesting, right? You know, especially now, jumping from screen to screen and city to city. It really is, a lot of shared understanding. And I think that's, I just love your narrative around the digital chapters. I guess we're in about chapter 3. And I think we've arrived at this point of shared understanding, and I'm seeing that on a global stage and not pockets of it. So I think I'll pause there, but specifically in the space I hang out in a lot, it's kind of this common global awareness now, which is something that wasn't there, 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Let's, anyone want to build upon that before I go to the next question?
Well, John called me out, so maybe I'll just add a couple of things.
Go first.
I think some of the stereotypes that Canada has, or Canadians have, of being nice, I love that stereotype, because I think we are, and I think we take care of each other, and I think we take care of our own. And I think when you do that, when you lift everyone up and you try, it's not always successful, but you at least try to offer opportunity, you're going to create a much more well-adapted, much more strengthened workforce. And I think when everyone has opportunities to contribute, and you have a diverse perspective and you have a diverse workforce, you're going to generate great quality products and experiences. And I think that naturally will play into Canada's roadmap of competing on the world stage for quite a long time, in comparison to those other world cities that were mentioned in the original question. So I think being nice will never mean that we finish last.
Love it. It's great.
I would just add one thing to that, to build. I love what Stephen just said, but I think if we think historically of where some of the big major tech hubs have been set up globally, that was before we have come now to a place where working from home, whether it's full-time, part-time, is starting to be normalized. But I really do think it's a wait and see. The assumption is, well, moving forward, now that we've sort of proven out that this works, working from home in a pandemic, you don't have to have limited opportunities in a market if you want to work for a global organization. That could be hired in market, but I think we have to wait and see. I think once the dust settles, maybe it's halfway through next year. A lot of us are getting back into an office environment. We're really sort of shaking the tree on where are the real efficiencies and what do we want to commit to create this global workforce. And are we going to hire, for example, at some of these big tech companies, some senior engineers, from somewhere in Western Canada or Eastern Canada? That would be the expectation, but I do think there's some wait and see.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next questions for Alana from Osiyoname. What are the challenges Google faces when trying to introduce new business owners to digital products?
Good question. I think, it's not as easy as it seems, right? I think even our simplest products, even Facebook and Instagram simplest products, still, they should be self-serve, but sometimes they're not, right? And so I think there's a level of complexity that we try to simplify, but sometimes people get stuck, particularly if you're, loading a product feed or whatnot. But there's a lot of resources out there to help. And I think the innovation is constantly invested in trying to streamline that and make it easier and easier. So I'd say there's that part of it. And honestly, I think it's just time. I think I've never met kind of a solo entrepreneur or an SMB who isn't wearing 10 hats at the same time. And their job is not marketing. Their job is whatever business that they're doing. And so this is always something hanging off the side of their desk. So I would say either kind of spend the money and get the help or invest the time. But I think that's probably like the biggest constraint with small business.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Okay, question here. Speaking of talent, are there initiatives to upskill or reskill existing employees within the company? Tom, maybe Leanne, do you want to touch that one? And anyone build?
Yeah, it's certainly part of our discussion. Part of the being in the pandemic is, I think we're all in some form of kind of over communicating and trying to stay connected across the company. So we're in some form of weekly all hands touch bases Q&A, and it's a frequent form of questions around career development, education, career opportunities, outside of the tree that someone is actually working in. And I think we're working through what those development opportunities could be, and those education opportunities. We've made a whole series of external capabilities available to our employees, but I would say we have not cracked the nut on how to do that. Beyond we have an enormous amount of content that's built for social media marketers that our teams all have access to and leverage.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think, working at Facebook, I feel very fortunate. We are a resource rich organization, and there's a big prioritization around learning and development. So whether that's, at an individual level with career progression and fine tuning your skills, whether that's at the product level, intense training opportunities for managers, for leaders. Outside of that, diversity inclusion is one of our priorities for sure. I think it's everybody's priority. So, managing bias and very specific training. So I think, again, if you're that curious person who prioritizes leaning in and being on a learning journey your entire career, the opportunities are really endless, and it's really for you as an individual to take advantage of.
Yeah. EY also has some rather interesting opportunities as well. We just announced our technology MBA that is free for every single EY employee to get an MBA from the Hult International Business School of Business in the UK. So anyone at any level within EY can go and earn their MBA, which is pretty astonishing. It just feels like a really wonderful opportunity. And so we're all pretty fortunate to have that available to us. And the learning team, the academy team at EY does a phenomenal job of offering really incredible programs and enrichment for every aspect of how to work and continue a lifelong learning journey.
John, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I totally have to jump on this one because I said earlier, we're going through a phase of converting from a traditional to a digital media company. So it's all we think about and have to do. It's through necessity. So, my group in particular are probably 3 years in now, where you've got a group of people that operated systems for a traditional television or radio business. Those audiences are in decline as audiences grow on digital platforms. So we have this fun analogy we use where, okay, folks, you're flying the plane while we're building the rocket ship over here, but we've got to find that right moment where everyone jumps across. So you've got folks that in some cases 10, 15, 20 years have been operating a traditional system that are now, learning the equivalent on the digital side. And it's pretty fascinating. And I think the one thing I'd say is the folks that started first to begin that upskill, cross skill are the ones that sort of raises their hands and wants to learn. So if you're in a traditional type role and just raise your hand. That's what I would have to add.
Yeah, great advice. Okay, moving on to this question from Danette that I'm sure is on many individuals' minds who are tuned in. People that are in their mid-careers, how would someone in their mid-career 37 fit into this industry, given that this industry focuses highly on the younger generation? Great question. And who would like to pick that one up?
I can take a swing.
Thanks, Tom.
My background was retail. I mean, I was in consulting, and then I spent over a decade in traditional specialty retail. I was a CIO at Gap and CIO at L Brands, and made a conscious decision that I was done with traditional retail at the end of my time with Gap. And I spent a year working with startups. Gap had recruited me out to San Francisco, so I was close to a lot of startups. I spent a year just doing free consulting, being the wise old person in a bunch of startup e-commerce businesses, helping them move their businesses forward, and investing the time of learning the new technologies, which opened the door for me to bridge into joining Zendesk in another kind of old wise role, helping them build out the infrastructure to scale the business and kind of change the trajectory of what I was doing into more tech, but leaning and leveraging on all the things I learned from retail and from my consulting days, whether it be, how to run and plan for a store, how to run e-commerce and so forth. So I think everyone's gaining useful and valuable experience, but being afraid to change directions is really the only limiter that you have of getting into technology in some way. There are way more jobs than there are people to do them.
Yeah.
But you got to take a little bit of risk.
Yeah, I would chime in there. I mean, I've been in tech for a while, but there are a lot of transversal skills that we're looking for that people in more traditional, quote unquote, industries have. So, like leadership, actually, let me back up. In a traditional field, you get a lot of training on structure, frameworks, how to make the machine work, right? So I, grew up at Unilever in CPG, and that is a mega machine with lots of cogs, and you figure out how that works. Then I went to Apple, and then I went to Google, and it's a mess, right? I mean, very candidly.
Would you really? Yeah.
But, taking my experience there, being able to apply structure, being able to apply those kind of how to coordinate things cross-functionally, I think there's a lot of skills there. I do agree with Tom that you have to take a risk and you have to make the jump, which is a little bit scary because it's unknown. But I mean, a lot of these traditional companies hire very smart people, and that's what we're looking for, right? Everyone here is talking about they're looking for talent, they're looking for good people, they're looking for very smart people who want to learn and grow and do better and solve interesting problems. And I don't think that's exclusive to tech.
Yeah, and also looking at it from the perspective of your background will be an incredible value add that, combined with digital technology skills, whichever pillar it is that suits your interests and your background, you become a weapon in these companies. The amount of value you can bring, the perspective you can bring into a scrappy startup, for that matter, is exceptional. So never discount yourself is really important to remember.
Ian, can I just build one thing on what Alana said? First of all, +1 to Alana's comment around a lot of tech companies, have some work to do around processes and operational excellence. I think in a fast growth period, those are some things traditional companies done well. So don't underestimate your skill set. And yes, you have to take risks, but also I think there's a real appreciation at a lot of tech companies for diversity of experience. Mm-hmm. If I just look at my team, some of the backgrounds are folks who came from media. Some are consultants, some came from banks, others were brand marketers at P&G and Unilever. So there is a real appreciation in many areas for that diversity of experience. So not to be underestimated.
Yeah, brilliant. It's actually interesting. In our digital skills survey last year, we found 82% of product owners didn't start their career in that field. And I think it was a similar number for data. And so if once you've upskilled yourself and you're going for these interviews, use that to your advantage and think of smart ways to present that to a future employer. Okay, question here from Keith. What has your biggest personal digital growth area been during the pandemic? and what have you adopted? I guess this goes to anyone that's applied their time in a manner that has allowed them to upskill in an area of their life. Anyone want to, other than Peloton, Tom, who would like to highlight any areas that they've pushed on personally?
I mean, an interesting one for me has been, and it started at Zendesk and then came across the line with me to Hootsuite. It was something I mentioned earlier, as companies have to take positions on values, and we've in the U.S. But it's globally. The pandemic and the intense conversations that are going on about all forms of inequalities are in the workforce, and they're part of the conversations in the workforce. And especially if you have a young workforce, they're front and center around those. And so getting really comfortable working through and talking through really uncomfortable topics and listening really, really hard when you have no answer is really hard in a leadership position. We're trained to knock things over, solve them, clear the path, and let the teams go. It's been a huge learning for me. I haven't solved it, still on the learning curve there, to listen to people's stories, to listen to their concerns, to try to figure out the steps and the paths forward around values of the company. It's been an ongoing, and it is not letting up set of conversations in both of the organizations that I've been part of.
I would definitely echo that. So I think if we look back, I mean, my training in this past 9 months, if I look what's happened, we've had all the social unrest. I think that's been global, and this boom in e-com. And I'd say my training mirrors that. So just like Tom, I think we've actually had a lot of manager training on how to have mental health conversations with our team, and what those resources are like. Dial up your empathy like 1,000%. And then every manager at Google is taking DEI training that is an hour every week for 6 months, basically. And it's actually timed, so you can't unlock the next module until 7 days after the first one. So it's like a real commitment. And like Tom was saying, it's opening my eyes as a leader, trying to think about people in different positions, just dialing up the empathy a lot. And then the technical one is really on our shopping suite. I mean, this may not be super relevant, but we launched a bunch of new stuff and I had to get up to speed on what it was. And so the freemium journey in our shopping suite is new. And so just learning about that.
Interesting.
I have one to add. My wife's been telling me to meditate for years. And Rogers did a deal with Headspace. So it works.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Amazing.
And I'll just add, health and well-being of our employees has been the number one priority for leaders, whether you're someone managing twins at home and homeschooling them and working, or you're in isolation for months in a small condo. Everyone has a different arrangement, and empathy and everyone's well-being has been very, very important for leadership, and will continue to be going forward well beyond the pandemic.
Essential. Well, everyone, I don't know where an hour and a half goes. It is 5:30 here on the East Coast. And I just want to say a massive thank you to our panelists. They are busy executives leading really stressful jobs and helping to inspire and lead their teams. And you've taken up valuable time to be with us and to inspire the audience that we've had today, hundreds tuning in from all over Canada to hear what you've had to say. And it's been really insightful. So thank you so much for bringing your experience and your expertise and your time and your willingness to our community. It goes such a long way. And to those of you that tuned in, thank you so much for taking the time to come and learn from our partners here. And we hope you've taken a lot away from today in terms of realizing where you can be spending time to improve on your personal skills in your career, and how to contextualize the growth of the Canadian marketplace and the role it's going to play in the global technology stage. It's an exciting time. As I said before, it comes down to the individual to take that first step, and companies and governments and enterprise are going to be supporting you along the way. So take some risks, invest in yourself, and thank you all for being part of this today. We wish you well. Have a wonderful end to the year, and stay well and stay safe. Take care.